Captain David Wilson stood at the bridge of the UES Prometheus, his weathered hands resting on the polished metal railing. Through the massive view screen, he watched Earth grow smaller, its blue-white sphere a reminder of everything they had to protect. At 55 years old, he never thought he'd be humanity's last hope. "Status report," he called out, his voice steady despite the weight on his shoulders. First Officer Lisa Martinez looked up from her console, her dark eyes reflecting the soft blue glow of the displays. "All systems are green, Captain. The new weapons are running at optimal levels, though Engineer Hayes says he'd like another week to test them. Time is the one thing we don't have," Wilson replied, turning to face his crew. The bridge hummed with nervous energy as the best officers Earth had to offer worked at their stations. They all knew the stakes: 6 billion lives depending on one ship and its experimental weapons. The Galactic Concordat had pushed humanity to the brink. Their massive fleets had destroyed every colony, every outpost, and most of Earth's defense force. Only the planet's experimental shield grid kept them at bay. But even that was failing. Message from Fleet Admiral Cooper called out Rachel Thompson from her communications station. "The Concordat fleet is moving past Mars. Their ultimatum stands: surrender within 48 hours or face extinction." Wilson nodded grimly. The Concordat, with their superior technology and vast armada, had expected an easy victory when they first encountered Earth. Instead, they found a species that refused to bow down. 3 years of brutal war followed, with humanity fighting for every inch of space. Engineering to bridge, Robert Hayes's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, the Prometheus protocol is stable. Those alien bastards won't know what hit them. The Prometheus protocol was humanity's secret weapon. While the Concordat relied on energy shields and plasma weapons, Earth's scientists had discovered something different: a way to manipulate the fabric of space itself. The Prometheus wasn't just a battleship. It was a testbed for technology that defied physics as they knew it." Lisa Martinez approached the captain's chair, speaking quietly. "Sir, initial scans show a flaw in their defense grid. The way their shields modulate. There's a pattern we might be able to exploit." "Show me," Wilson ordered, following her to the tactical display. The screen showed complex wave patterns in the alien shields, a rhythmic pulse that repeated every few seconds. "It's like a heartbeat," Martinez explained. "Regular, predictable. If we time our attacks just right." A warning klaxon cut through their discussion. Amy Peterson's hands flew across the navigation console. Multiple contacts. Concordat scouts, coming around the dark side of the moon. "Battle stations," Wilson commanded, his voice calm but firm. Throughout the massive ship, red lights flashed as crew members rushed to their posts. "This is it, people. Everything we've trained for." The Prometheus was massive, nearly 2 kilometers of advanced technology and human determination. Its sleek black hull absorbed radar and light, making it almost invisible against the backdrop of space. Inside, 5,000 crew members prepared for their first real combat test. "Scouts are charging weapons," called out Tactical Officer Eric Barnes. "They're targeting our engines." Wilson straightened in his chair. "Activate the Prometheus protocol. Target the lead ship only. Let's show them what we can do." The ship hummed as its experimental weapons powered up. On the view screen, 3 Concordat scout ships approached, their silver hulls gleaming in the sunlight. They were beautiful in their own way, Wilson thought, like deadly birds of prey. "Protocol active," Hayes reported from engineering. "Ready on your mark." Wilson took a deep breath. In all of human history, no moment had ever carried more weight than this one. Fire. The Prometheus protocol activated. There was no beam of light, no visible projectile, just a subtle distortion in space. The lead Concordat ship seemed to shiver for a moment. Then, to the amazement of everyone watching, it simply came apart. Not in an explosion, but in layers, as if some giant hand was peeling an onion. The remaining scout ships immediately turned to retreat, but the demonstration had achieved its purpose. Within minutes, the Prometheus's sensors detected massive energy signatures as the main Concordat fleet changed course, moving to intercept this new threat. "Send a message to Earth," Wilson ordered, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Tell them the Prometheus protocol works. And send one to the Concordat fleet too." "What's the message, sir?" Thompson asked. "Tell them humanity sends its regards." As the Prometheus moved to meet the incoming fleet, Wilson knew this was just the beginning. But for the first time since the war began, humanity had hope. And sometimes, hope was the deadliest weapon of all. The UES Prometheus shuddered as another blast from the Concordat fleet struck its shields. Engineer Robert Hayes wiped sweat from his forehead as he worked in the ship's massive engine room. Red warning lights flashed everywhere. "The weapon system is overheating," he shouted to his team. "Get me those coolant readings now." Above in the bridge, Captain Wilson watched as 5 Concordat warships surrounded them. The enemy vessels were huge, each one shaped like a silver arrowhead and bristling with weapons. The Prometheus had destroyed 3 of their ships already, but the aliens were learning, adapting their tactics. "They're trying to box us in," First Officer Martinez said, pointing at the tactical display. The enemy ships were moving in a pattern, trying to trap the Prometheus in a kill zone. Wilson nodded. "They think they're hunting us. Let's show them who's really being hunted." The ship's AI displayed new data across the main screen. The Concordat's latest message scrolled across in bold letters. "Surrender now. Earth's destruction is inevitable." "Such polite fellows," Wilson muttered. "Miss Peterson, plot us a course through their formation. Mr. Barnes, prepare the protocol for a widespread burst." Amy Peterson's fingers danced across her navigation panel. "Sir, if we get this wrong, we'll tear ourselves apart." "Then let's get it right." Down in engineering, Hayes and his team had stripped off their uniform jackets as they worked. The Prometheus protocol was powerful, but it wasn't perfect. Each use generated massive heat, enough to melt the ship's systems if they weren't careful. "Coolant systems at maximum," one of his technicians called out. "We can give you one more shot, maybe 2. Hayes hit his comm button. "Bridge, this is engineering. Whatever you're planning, make it count. We won't get many more chances." The Concordat ships were closing in. Their weapons fire intensified, making the Prometheus's shields flare bright blue. Each hit brought them closer to failure. "Now, Ms. Peterson," Wilson ordered. The Prometheus turned sharply, its engines glowing bright as fusion fire. Instead of trying to escape the trap, they drove straight toward the largest enemy ship. At the last second, Peterson triggered a series of micro-jumps, something that should have been impossible in normal space. The massive human ship blinked in and out of existence, appearing and disappearing so fast it looked like there were 3 Prometheus ships instead of 1. The Concordat ship's targeting systems couldn't keep up. "Protocol ready," Barnes announced from tactical. Wilson leaned forward in his chair. "Fire." This time, the protocol created a wave of distortion that spread out like ripples in a pond. 2 of the Concordat ships came apart instantly, their molecules simply losing cohesion. A third spun away, badly damaged. But the remaining ships had learned. Their shields pulsed in a new pattern, somehow deflecting part of the protocol's effect. They returned fire with everything they had. "Shield failure in 30 seconds, Martinez reported as the ship rocked with impacts. In engineering, Hayes saw his chance. "Bridge. Their shield modification. It's creating a power surge in their systems. If we hit them now." Wilson understood immediately. "All power to the protocol. Everything we've got." "But sir," Martinez protested, "that could burn out the whole system." "Better than being dead. Do it." Hayes and his team worked frantically, redirecting power from every non-essential system. The lights dimmed throughout the ship. Life support switched to backup power. The Prometheus's mighty engines quieted to a whisper. All that energy poured into one final shot. The protocol fired. This time, there was no subtlety, no finesse. Raw power met the Concordat ship's modified shields. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the energy surge Hayes had spotted turned against them. Their own shields collapsed inward, crushing the ships like aluminum cans in a giant's fist. Silence fell on the bridge. On the view screen, debris from 5 Concordat warships drifted through space. The Prometheus floated among the wreckage, its systems slowly coming back online. "Damage report," Wilson called out, his voice hoarse. Martinez checked her displays. "The protocol. It's fried, sir. Hayes says it'll take at least 12 hours to get it back online. But we're alive. And we learned something valuable," Wilson said, standing up. "The Concordat can adapt. They can learn. But so can we." He turned to communications. "Send the battle data to Earth. Tell them we've proven the concept, but we need to make it better. Stronger." As the crew began repairs, Wilson stared at the wreckage outside. The Concordat had just learned that humanity wasn't easy prey, but he knew the real fight was just beginning. Somewhere out there, the alien leaders were planning their response. And when they came back, they would come back with everything they had. 3 days after their first major battle, the UES Prometheus waited in the darkness near Alpha Centauri. The ship's black hull reflected no light, making it almost invisible against the backdrop of space. Captain Wilson had ordered all non-essential systems shut down to avoid detection. "Multiple contacts," Eric Barnes whispered from his tactical station, as if the enemy might hear him through space. "Big ones. Looks like they brought their serious warships this time." Through the main view screen, the crew watched as 7 massive Concordat battleships emerged from faster-than-light travel. Each one was 3 times the size of the Prometheus, their hulls gleaming with a metallic purple sheen. Behind them came smaller ships, at least 20 cruisers and destroyers. "They're not taking any chances now," Lisa Martinez said quietly. "That's enough firepower to glass a planet." Wilson nodded. After their first encounter, the Concordat had clearly decided to stop underestimating the humans. The alien ships moved in perfect formation, their shields overlapping to protect each other. "Sir," Barnes called out, excitement in his voice. "I'm seeing something in their shield patterns. The way they're linked together, it's creating gaps. Small ones, but they're there." Wilson moved to the tactical station. "Show me." On the display, Barnes pointed out tiny flickers in the enemy shields. Each time the ships adjusted their formation, the gaps appeared for a split second. Most people would have missed it, but Barnes had spent the last 3 days studying nothing but Concordat shield patterns. "We can't use the protocol yet," Robert Hayes reported from engineering. "Still need another 4 hours for full power." Wilson smiled. "Then we'll have to do this the old-fashioned way. Ms. Peterson, plot us a course between those 2 battleships. Mr. Barnes, prepare conventional weapons." The bridge crew looked at their captain like he had lost his mind. Taking on 1 Concordat battleship with regular weapons was suicide. 7 of them, plus escorts. Impossible. "Trust me," Wilson said. "Sometimes the best way past a shield is to walk right through the front door." The Prometheus's engines came to life, pushing the massive ship forward. Almost immediately, the Concordat fleet detected them. Alien warning signals filled the communication channels. "They're calling us primitive suicidal fools," Rachel Thompson translated from her communication station. "Let's show them how primitive we are," Wilson replied. "All hands, battle stations." The Prometheus accelerated straight toward the enemy fleet. The Concordat ships opened fire, their energy weapons lighting up space like artificial stars. But the human ship didn't try to dodge. "Armor holding," Martins reported. "But we can't take much more of this." "Almost there," Wilson said calmly. "Miss Peterson, on my mark. Execute roll pattern Delta." The enemy fire intensified. Warning alarms blared throughout the ship as armor plates began to melt under the assault. The Concordat battleships loomed larger and larger on the view screen. "Now," Wilson ordered. Amy Peterson's hands flew across her console. The Prometheus rolled and spun, executing a series of movements that looked like the ship was out of control. The Concordat fleet adjusted their formation to trap the apparently damaged vessel. That was exactly what Wilson had wanted. "There," Barnes shouted, "the gap's opening." As the alien ships moved, their overlapping shields created a larger weakness. For just 2 seconds, a hole appeared in their perfect defense. "All conventional weapons, fire," Wilson commanded. The Prometheus unleashed everything it had. Rail guns, fat hypersonic projectiles. Missile pods emptied their loads. Energy beams lashed out. None of these weapons could normally hurt a Concordat battleship. But they weren't aiming for the ships. The barrage struck the exact point where 4 shield generators were trying to sync with each other. The overlapping fields, meant to strengthen their defense, instead created a cascade failure. When the shields fell, they took the generators with them. Alarms screamed across the Concordat fleet as a quarter of their ships suddenly lost shield protection. The perfect formation broke apart in confusion. "Hayes," Wilson called out, "how long until the protocol is ready?" "Maybe an hour if I redline everything." "You've got 2 minutes. Peterson, keep us moving. Don't let them regroup." The Prometheus danced through the enemy fleet like a boxer in a crowd of bodybuilders. Too big to be graceful, the Concordat ships couldn't keep up with the human vessel's maneuvers. 2 minutes later, the protocol fired. 3 unshielded Concordat ships simply ceased to exist. 2 more took heavy damage before their emergency systems could compensate. The remaining ships retreated, jumping away to faster-than-light speed as quickly as they could. They left behind their wounded companions, a clear sign of how badly they had been shaken. "Send a message to Fleet Command," Wilson ordered as his crew cheered. "Tell them the Concordat's perfect shields have a flaw, and we know how to exploit it." The battle was over, but Wilson felt no joy in their victory. Because now the Concordat would know something too. Humanity wasn't just fighting back. They were hunting them. "They call us the Planet Killer now," Rachel Thompson said, listening to intercepted Concordat communications. 2 weeks had passed since the battle at Alpha Centauri, and the UES Prometheus had just destroyed its 15th enemy fleet. Captain Wilson stood at his usual spot on the bridge, watching the ship's eye display possible enemy locations. The Concordat had changed their tactics. Instead of facing the Prometheus directly, they now sent their best hunter-killer groups to track and ambush the human vessel. 3 enemy fleets converging on our position," Amy Peterson announced from navigation. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. She hadn't left her station in 12 hours. "They're trying to trap us between the star systems." "Let them try," Wilson replied. "Dr. Carter, how's our AI doing with the new predictions?" Dr. John Carter looked up from his computer station. He had been working on improving the ship's artificial intelligence, teaching it to think more like their enemies. "The AI says they're not really trying to trap us here. This is a distraction. The real attack will come from..." "New contacts," Barnes shouted from tactical. Huge energy readings coming from behind the gas giant. The main screen lit up as 5 sleek black ships emerged from behind the massive planet. They weren't the usual silver-purple of Concordat vessels. These were different. "The Shadow Knives," Martins whispered. Everyone on the bridge had heard of them. The Concordat's legendary assassin fleet, ships that had never failed a mission. "All hands, battle stations," Wilson ordered calmly. "Hayes, is the protocol ready?" "Ready, sir, but these ships are different," Hayes replied from engineering. "Their hull readings are all wrong, like they're not fully there." The Shadow Knives moved like no other ships they'd seen. They seemed to flicker in and out of normal space, making them almost impossible to track. The Prometheus fired the protocol, but the black ships simply weren't there when the weapon effect passed through their positions. "They're using some kind of phase technology," Carter said excitedly, watching his displays. The AI is learning their pattern, but they shifted every few seconds. The enemy ships struck from multiple directions. Their weapons were different too. Instead of energy beams, they fired streams of particles that passed right through the Prometheus's shields. Hull breach on Deck 12. Martinez reported as the ship shook. We're venting atmosphere. Wilson gripped his chair as another hit rocked the ship. Peterson, get us out of here. They're blocking all the normal escape routes, Peterson said, her hands flying over her controls. Then she smiled. But I don't need normal routes. The young navigator had spent months studying how gravity affected spacetime. Now she did something that should have been impossible. She plotted a faster-than-light jump through the gas giant's gravity well. That jump will tear us apart, Martinez protested. No, it won't, Peterson said confidently. Trust me. Wilson looked at his navigator's sure face, then at the approaching shadow knives. Do it. Peterson activated the jump drive. The Prometheus shot forward, diving straight toward the gas giant. The massive planet's gravity caught them, trying to pull them in. Warning alarms screamed throughout the ship as the hull creaked under the strain. But Peterson had calculated everything perfectly. They used the planet's gravity like a slingshot, accelerating to faster-than-light speed at an angle the enemy couldn't predict. The Prometheus vanished, leaving the frustrated shadow knives behind. They reappeared 2 systems away. The ship was damaged but intact. Status report, Wilson called out, picking himself up from the floor where the violent jump had thrown him. Hull damage on 3 decks, Martinez reported. The protocol is still online, but those phase-shifted ships, sir, we can't beat them with our usual tactics. Wilson nodded. The Concordat had finally shown their real power. The shadow knives would keep coming, hunting them across the galaxy until they found a way to destroy the Prometheus. Dr. Carter, he said, get with Hayes and Peterson. I want to know everything about how those ships phase in and out of space. If they can do it, so can we. Sir, Thompson called out suddenly. I'm picking up a transmission. It's not from the Concordat. Put it through. A new voice filled the bridge, speaking in broken English. Human ship, we see you fight. We hate Concordat too. Maybe. We help each other. Wilson shared a look with Martinez. They had thought they were fighting alone. But maybe the Concordat had other enemies out there. Tell them we're listening, Wilson ordered. The hunt wasn't over, but the game had just changed. Now they just had to survive long enough to find these new allies, and hope the shadow knives didn't find them first. The meeting room on the UES Prometheus was tense. Captain Wilson sat at the head of the table, looking at their new allies. 3 tall, blue-skinned beings called the Rachnids. Once slaves of the Concordat, they had rebelled 5 years ago. This is the place, the lead Rachnid. Commander Zax pointed to a hologram showing a massive space station, Concordat's secret weapon factory. They build their best ships here, including shadow knives. Security Chief Mark Reynolds studied the hologram carefully. After 20 years as a Marine, he knew a fortress when he saw one. How many guards? Thousands, Zax replied. But we know way inside, through maintenance tunnels. Concordat thinks we are too stupid to remember their secrets. They are wrong. Wilson looked at his officers. First Officer Martinez sat to his right, while Engineer Hayes and Dr. Carter studied the station's technical readouts. They had spent 3 days hiding in an asteroid field, planning this mission. The shadow knives almost destroyed us last time, Wilson said, if we can take out their production facility. Sir, Thompson called from the bridge through the intercom. Long-range sensors detect 3 Concordat patrol fleets in the sector. We have maybe 6 hours before they find us. Wilson stood up. Then we do this now. Reynolds, get your boarding team ready. Hayes, how's our new surprise? Hayes grinned. The phase shift device is ready. We reversed what we learned from the shadow knives. It only works for short periods, but it should get our boarding team inside. The next hour was a blur of activity. Reynolds led 30 Marines in putting on special suits designed for space combat. The Arachnids provided detailed maps of the station's interior, marking guard posts and security systems. Remember, Reynolds told his team in the launch bay, "We go in fast and quiet. Plant the charges on their prototype ships, then get out. No heroes today." The Prometheus dropped out of faster-than-light travel just outside the station's sensor range. Thanks to their Arachnid allies, they had the correct codes to avoid immediate detection. "Phase device ready," Hayes reported from engineering. "You've got 3 minutes once inside before it fails." Reynolds and his team entered the small shuttle they would use to reach the station. Captain Wilson's voice came over their comms. "Good hunting. Try not to start an interstellar incident." "No promises, sir," Reynolds replied with a smile. The shuttle launched, its hull flickering as the phase device activated. They passed through the station's outer wall like it was made of smoke. Reynolds checked his weapon, a special gun designed to work in the phased state. Inside the station, they split into 3 teams. Reynolds led his group toward the main construction bay. Through their partially phased state, they could see Concordat workers moving around, but no one saw them. 2 minutes, Hayes warned through the comm. They reached the prototype bay. 5 new Shadow Knife ships sat in their construction cradles, nearly complete. Reynolds' team moved quickly, placing explosive charges at key points. 1 minute. The other teams reported success in the engine testing facilities and the computer core. Everything was going perfectly. Then the phase device failed. Alarms screamed throughout the station as the humans suddenly became solid again. Guard troops appeared at both ends of the corridor, weapons ready. "Well," Reynolds muttered, "so much for quiet." He opened fire, his team taking cover behind construction equipment. "Emergency extraction." Wilson's voice came through the comm. "Get to the upper docking bay. We're coming in hot." Reynolds and his team fought their way up through the station. The Concordat troops were everywhere, but they weren't prepared for human combat tactics. The Marines used their superior training, moving from cover to cover, always advancing. They reached the upper bay just as the Prometheus smashed through the station's outer doors. The ship's point defense weapons cleared a path to the open cargo ramp. "Everyone in," Reynolds shouted. His team sprinted aboard, laying down covering fire as they retreated. As soon as they were aboard, the Prometheus pulled away from the station. Through the viewing ports, Reynolds watched as their charges detonated. The explosion started small, then chain reacted through the prototype bay. The entire station began breaking apart. "Concordat vessels approaching," Thompson reported on the bridge. "A lot of them." "Get us out of here, Peterson," Wilson ordered. Mission accomplished. The Prometheus jumped to safety just as the station exploded completely. They had destroyed not just the Shadow Knife production facility, but all of the prototype ships as well. In the aftermath, Reynolds joined the bridge crew for their debriefing. The Arachnids were celebrating their first major victory against their former masters. "This will hurt them," Zach said happily. "But Concordat has many secrets, many hidden places. This was just one." Wilson nodded. "Then we'll find the others. All of them." He looked at his crew, seeing the determination in their eyes. "The Concordat thought they could hunt us. Instead, we're bringing the fight to them." For the first time since the war began, they had a real chance, and they weren't going to waste it. The UES Prometheus hung in space near the edge of Concordat territory. Through the main view screen, Captain Wilson and his crew could see their target, the Concordat's home system, guarded by the largest fleet they had ever encountered. 217 ships, Barnes reported from Tactical, his voice low with awe, including their new flagship, the World Ender. The World Ender lived up to its name. The massive ship was shaped like a curved blade, stretching 20 kilometers from end to end. Even from this distance, its weapons arrays glowed with deadly energy. "Our Arachnid friends came through," Lisa Martinez said, studying the intelligence reports. The Concordat leaders are all there, meeting on their capital world, their entire ruling council. The past month had been a blur of battles and narrow escapes. The Prometheus, along with their Arachnid allies, had destroyed 3 more weapons facilities and freed 6 slave worlds. But the Concordat's grip on the galaxy remained strong. "Dr. Carter," Wilson called out, "what does the AI say about our chances?" Carter looked up from his station, his face grim. "Less than 10% survival probability. Even with the protocol, there are too many ships." He paused. "But if we succeed, we could end the war today." Robert Hayes's voice came through the comm from engineering. "Captain, I think we've got something. Remember how the Concordat ships link their shields? We found a way to turn that against them." But what, Hayes?" "It'll burn out the protocol completely. 1 shot, that's all we get. And we have to be close, inside their defense line." Wilson nodded slowly. 1 shot. 1 chance to end the war. "Thompson, send word to our Arachnid allies. Tell them to begin their attack on the outer planets. Let's give the Concordats something else to worry about." Soon, reports came in of Arachnid ships striking mining facilities and defense stations throughout the system. The massive Concordat fleet began to split up, ships peeling away to defend their territory. "Now comes the hard part," Wilson said. "Peterson, plot us a course through their lines, right down their throat." Amy Peterson's hands moved over her navigation console. The AI calculated a path. "Sir, but it's crazy. Crazy is what we do best. All hands, battle stations." The Prometheus powered up, its black hull absorbing light as it moved forward. The first Concordat ships spotted them immediately, opening fire with everything they had. "Shields holding," Martinez reported as the ship shook. "But we can't take much of this." They drove straight toward the enemy fleet. Peterson's crazy course took them through gaps in the Concordat formation that seemed impossibly small. The human ship spun and weaved, somehow avoiding the worst of the enemy fire. "The World Ender is moving to intercept," Barnes warned. The massive flagship was turning, bringing its main weapon to bear, a gravity beam that could tear planets apart. "Stay on course," Wilson ordered. More enemy ships appeared around them, their weapons filling space with deadly energy. Warning alarms blared throughout the ship. Hull breaches appeared on multiple decks. The shields were failing. "Almost in position," Hayes called from engineering. "But their flagship shields are incredibly strong. Even the protocol might not." "It will work," Wilson said firmly. "Because it has to." The Prometheus took more hits. Parts of the hull were torn away, venting atmosphere into space. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut throughout the ship. "Now," Hayes shouted. "We're in position." Wilson stood from his chair, staring at the World Ender through the view screen. "Fire the protocol. Everything we've got." The Prometheus's final shot looked different from all the others. Instead of destroying ships directly, it created a wave that connected with the linked shields of the Concordat fleet. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the energy began to feed back through their shield network. Ship after ship lost power as their shield generators overloaded. The World Ender's massive defensive screen flickered and died. "Their shields are down," Barnes shouted triumphantly. "All of them." But before they could celebrate, more alarms sounded. "The protocol is burning out," Hayes yelled. "Power systems failing across the ship." Wilson watched as the mighty Concordat fleet drifted helplessly, their ships dark and vulnerable. He opened a channel to all frequencies. "This is Captain Wilson of the UES Prometheus. Your fleet is defenseless. Your leaders are exposed. Surrender now, or we'll show you exactly why they call us the Planet Killer." For several long seconds, there was silence. Then a new voice came through. The Concordat High Command itself. Perhaps it is time we talked." Wilson smiled, but it was a tired smile. They had won, but the cost had been enormous. The Prometheus would never fight again. But it had done its job. Humanity had reached into the heart of its enemy and found its breaking point. 3 days after the Great Battle, Captain David Wilson stood in the grand meeting hall of the Concordat capital world. The UES Prometheus floated in orbit above, a wounded but proud guardian. Its black hull showed countless scars from the battles it had won, and the protocol that had made it so feared was now nothing more than burned-out circuits. "The terms are fair," First Officer Lisa Martinez said quietly, looking over the peace treaty. Around them, representatives from 100 worlds had gathered. Former slaves of the Concordat, now free peoples. The Concordat leaders sat across the massive table, their silver-scaled faces showing no emotion. But Wilson could see the fear in their eyes when they looked at him. They had learned to fear humanity, perhaps too well. "You destroyed our greatest ships," the Concordat High Commander spoke. "You turned our own technology against us. You freed our slave worlds. And now you offer peace." "Peace was always the goal," Wilson replied. "We never wanted this war. You attacked us, thinking we were primitive and weak. That was your mistake." In the corner of the room, Rachel Thompson worked with other translators, making sure every word was clear to all species present. The Rachnids stood proudly among the other freed races, their blue skin gleaming under the hall's lights. "There is one thing we don't understand," another Concordat leader said. "Your ship, your weapon, you could destroy our homeworld now. Take revenge for what we did to your colonies. Why don't you?" Wilson thought about all they had lost. The colonies burned, the lives ended, the families torn apart. The Concordat expected revenge. Maybe they even deserved it. Robert Haves's voice came through Wilson's earpiece. The engineer was still aboard the Prometheus, trying to repair what he could. "Captain, the ship's AI just finished its final analysis. The damage to the protocol, it's not just burned out. Using it the way we did changed something fundamental about space in this region. No one will be able to build another weapon like it. Ever." Wilson nodded slightly. Perhaps that was for the best. "We don't destroy your world," he told the Concordat leaders, "because that's not who we are. Humanity fights when we must, but we prefer to build rather than destroy." He pressed a button, and a hologram appeared above the table. It showed plans for joint scientific projects, trade routes, and cultural exchange programs. 100 years of peace, Wilson continued. "That's our term. A century where we work together, learn from each other, where we explore the galaxy as partners, not enemies. After that, if you want to try fighting us again," he smiled, "well, we'll still be humanity." The Concordat leaders looked at each other. They had expected demands for territory, for resources, for revenge. Instead, they were being offered a future. 100 years, the High Commander said finally. "We accept." As the treaty was signed, Wilson walked to the great windows overlooking the capital city. Dr. John Carter joined him there. "The AI says there's only a 30% chance they'll keep the peace for the full 100 years, Carter said quietly. "I know," Wilson replied, "but that's 30% better than 0. And next time, if there is a next time, we'll be ready." Back on the Prometheus, Wilson made his final shipwide announcement. "Crew of the Prometheus, this is your captain speaking. Today marks not just the end of a war, but the beginning of something new. Each of you has helped write a chapter in humanity's story, and while the Prometheus may never fight again, the lessons we learned about courage, about innovation, about standing together against impossible odds, those will live forever." He looked around the bridge at his crew. Martinez, who had been his rock through every crisis. Hayes, who had pushed their technology beyond its limits. Peterson, who had found paths where none existed. Barnes, Thompson, Carter, Reynolds, each one had played their part in saving humanity. "Earth has recalled us home," he continued. "There will be medals, ceremonies, speeches, but the real victory isn't in any of that. It's in what we chose to do with our power. We could have been destroyers. Instead, We chose to be builders. That's humanity's real strength. The Prometheus turned toward Earth, its engines glowing softly. Behind it, ships from a dozen species, former enemies and new allies alike, formed an honor guard to escort them home. They had come to this region of space as Earth's last hope, a single ship against an empire. They left as legends, having taught the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. Never underestimate humanity. We don't just fight to survive. We fight to build a better universe for everyone.